Hi, welcome to the Museum of American Speed. My name is Bob Mays, and today we're going to be talking about one of the legends of sprint car racing, the one and only Jan Opperman. Jan was such a special person. It's one of those, he was like a Michael Jackson or a Elvis type personality to the sprint car set. And you just don't come up with that every day.
Jan Opperman continues his drive as he passes Ralph Blackett down the front chute and moves up to fifth. Jan is considered by many to be the greatest sprint car driver in the world, especially on dirt. For some reason, he's able to pass on.
I think what made Jan Opperman so unique as a race car driver, number one, he had a very good technical sense of the cars and how he wanted them to work. And he was just a natural athlete. He was a very good football player when he was a kid till he got his knee hurt. He was a good motorcycle racer. He was a boxer. I mean, he did a lot of things that required coordination and that inner ear sense, and that really, I think, helped him in his driving. Jan had very unusual eyes. It was like you could look into his soul. Somebody said he had like the eyes of a wolf. I've heard people described as, you know, this guy doesn't know any strangers. They're just friends that he hasn't met yet. And that's kind of how Opperman was. He really can't just talk about his personality and have anybody get the sense of it.
All right, here's a rookie. Jan Opperman at car number 51. They used to call him the racing hippie, but when he was signed up by Parnelli Jones, they had him cut his hair twice in 2 days, and he is much straighter.
You could be so mad at that guy, you'd pile your car up in a corner and crash it and everything, and you'd be so mad at him, and then he'd come back into the infield, and once he looked you in the eye, all that animosity just melted away. You just could not stay mad at him. He could almost put a spell over people. And that was one of the things that when he became a minister, that was one of the real attributes for him, was the fact that he could talk to crowds, and it was almost as if he was talking to you personally sometimes. Well, when Jan started driving for Bill, they hit it off right off the bat and got up to speed pretty quickly.
Jan had it all crossed up and did a slider under Snyder to take the lead in the fourth pocket. Now Opperman is number one with George Snyder hanging in for second.
And one of the first big races that he won was the Hawkeye Futurity over at Des Moines, Iowa on June 9th, 1969. And that was a big, well-paying Midwestern race, and it got Jan a lot of publicity, got Speedy Bill a lot of publicity too. And that was really when Bill and Jan started their run, and they were winning races throughout 1969. Jan and Bill had a very successful tenure together, and it was kind of in segments. Because Jan would go, he would race for Bill, and then he'd go race for somebody else for a year or two, and then he'd come back to Bill. Jan was working very closely with Don Maxwell, a car builder here in Lincoln. Jan convinced Bill, and it didn't take a whole lot of convincing, that Bill needed to upgrade and get a new race car. This was 1974. And they built this car. Actually, they built several cars, but the Speedway Motors car was the one that they built for Bill. And of course, Bill wanted Jan to drive that car. And so he did end up driving it quite a bit. And they won a lot of races together. They won the Winter Nationals down in Mesquite, Texas. They won another BCRA championship with that car. And what Bill always said was his biggest win of his career was the 1976 Tony Holman Classic in Terre Haute, Indiana. That was actually the highest paying sprint car race at that time. Nowadays, the World of Outlaws and whatnot pay a lot more than that. But when he came up in the mid-70s, he was primarily just ran whatever race was paying the most that weekend and traveled all over the country. And there was no World of Outlaws then, but he brought the stature of the Outlaws, which were non-USAC drivers for the most part. He brought them to such a level that I think that's what really got the World of Outlaws started in 1978 was Jan Opperman. Like I say, guys like Rick Ferkel and Roger Rager and Bubby Jones really kind of rode on Opperman's coattails. And what I mean by that, they were great racers in their own right, but they got a lot more publicity because they were hanging around with Opperman and racing in those same kind of races, and sometimes beating Opperman. Late in the 1976 season, Jan had a really bad crash at the Hoosier 100, which is one of the biggest dirt track races of the year, and had a serious head injury. Didn't drive a race car for almost a year because of it. We had to go through a lot of therapy. The end for Jan Opperman was not really pretty, not really happy for him. He had that wreck in 1976 at the Hoosier 100. He came back, he tried to race. He was not a bad racer after that, but he wasn't the real Jan Opperman that we had all known. But still tried racing. Then in 1981 at Jennerstown, Pennsylvania, he was racing, and on the start of the race, he had another crash, another very serious head injury, and after that he was basically incapacitated. Had a lot of trouble communicating, never really ever walked again. His parents basically had to take care of him. In the mid-90s, he passed away. You know, Jan Opperman is one of the giants to me in the history of sprint car racing. There's certain names that just resonate with people, and Opperman was one of those. The first time I went to a race and talked to somebody and I mentioned Jan Opperman's name and they didn't recognize it, that was a very sad day for me. I think what people can probably take away, and maybe young racers can take away from that, is the fact that if you just be yourself and you treat people with respect, which Opperman did. I mean, the crowds after the races at his pit were always huge because people just liked being around him. So I think that was really a lot of what made him successful. He was able to get guys behind him that could work on the cars and could pay for the cars and the best equipment possible. I think his impact on circle track racing came more from his personality than anything. He was capable of winning a lot of races. He had a tremendous amount of talent, and of course that was a very necessary ingredient into that. But it was his ability to connect with people. I've never met anybody that's more charismatic than him. But when you put the whole package together, the whole thing, he was just the closest there was.